Alrighty, so this is going to be the first in a series of videos on teaching you how to create your race car. We're going to start off with our marking out, but before we can do that, we need to gather some bits and pieces, and I'm going to have to go through with you this drawing here so you can understand what's going on that. So I've got myself a pen for marking out. A ballpoint pen or a pencil works best for marking out. We don't want anything that's going to soak into the timber. I have got my metal ruler here, okay, with my measurements going all the way to the edge, and I've checked that it's a nice neat edge as well so I can easily see that, and a tri-square, which we're going to need for creating our lines. Okay, so before we get into doing any of our measuring, we're going to have a bit of a look at our drawing here. So this drawing here shows us two faces, square on, as well as an isometric view at the top here, showing us a bit of information about what it looks like. Now, it's just important to note that this isometric view does not facing the same way that the car is down here. So this front part here on the car is actually this front section here. Okay, so this other view here is a top view or a bird's eye view, and this is a side view. So if we were to take our piece of wood, okay, we can place our piece of wood on this here like this. Okay, and then if we turn it onto its side like this, okay, so we can kind of see how it fits on. Now, with all of our working drawings that you're going to come across, measurements are put where it is best fitting on the drawing without getting confused with other elements. So even if I need to know something on the top, and if I look here, the measurement from say here to here isn't defined on this top view here. But because these all line up, okay, all of these drawings, they're drawn in line with each other, I can actually use the measurements from the side view here to help me mark out the parts along the top there that I'm going to need to be able to mark out first of all. Okay, so if I want to know this distance here, I look down here to where those line up and I go, okay, well, that's 20 millimeters. I then will need to know the distance to this line here from that one there, and that's 30 millimeters. From there to the side of this, first side of this trench here is another 20, and then that trench is 20 millimeters wide as well. Okay, so those are the first set of markings out that I'm going to need. So I've got my piece of wood here and my ruler, and I've got my dimensions just down here that I need to do, but they're for marking out where these lines go along the top. So I'm going to mark it on the top face here. I'm going to place my ruler on here so that I've got the edge of the ruler carefully lining up with the edge of my material. And I can use my finger to feel if there's any ruler sticking out or not quite at the edge there. I want to make sure it's pretty much dead on. The more accurate I get this, the better my marking out is going to be. Okay, so my first one is 20. Just move that slightly when I hit the side of my stand there. I'm going to make a little mark going up like this. Okay, then I'm going to come across 30. Now I could move my ruler, but if I can keep it in the same spot, I'll have even better accuracy. So given my numbers are fairly simple to add together here, I'm going to add 20 and 30 together to get 50. Okay, then I've got another 20 along from that, so that will get me out to 70. Okay, and then another 20 along from that, and that gets me to 90. Now, just a note here, if your ruler is in centimeters, it doesn't matter, because if I just take the 0 off of here, that gives me the centimeters. Okay, so if yours is in centimeters, it'd be 2, 5, 7, and then 9. Okay, at this point, I've got my marks for where they are, but I haven't got any lines yet. I'm going to use my tri-square to get the lines. Okay, so on our tri-square has different parts. We've got the blade here. Okay, we've got the stock and the brass plate. We want to make sure that the brass plate is up against the side of our material at all times, and as much of it as possible is touching. If we can't get a lot of this touching, say I was going to mark something right along the edge there, then I turn it over to get to that marking so that I've got as much of that against it as possible. So it must be touching. For this one here, I like to hold it in my non-dominant hand. And I have my thumb on the bottom of the stock there, my pointer finger holding the blade down against the material, so my thumb is holding it against that edge, my pointer finger is holding it down, and then the rest of my fingers are kind of holding it against my block of wood. Okay, so they're holding the block of wood. And I can move this around using my thumb and my pointer finger and get it to slide to where my mark is. I can also turn my wood around as well if I need to, if that makes my life a bit easier. I'm then going to take my pen or pencil. I'm just going to double check quickly like that it's in the right spot, and then I can transfer that line going all the way down my timber. Nice and quick and super accurate. So again, sliding it along, double checking I'm in the right spot, all the way down, keep going along, check I'm in the right spot. And this last one, I'm just going to turn it over so I get a better amount. You can see my hands holding it a little bit differently just to make it nice and easy. Now, if it's a bit awkward, then you, as I said, you can always turn it over. But notice how my thumb's still making sure that this brass plate is touching my wood the whole time. Okay, so that gives me my first lines that I need. Now, some of these lines I need to go all the way around the timber, and some of them I don't. Okay, so these first two lines, I need them to go down both sides and the bottom. These next two lines, I only need them to go down both sides. Okay, now what I can do here, again, holding it the same way I did before, where I'm clamping it against my wood and making sure that that brass plate is always against my wood. I'm going to move this along until I can make sure that I'm in line with my previous marked line, and then just go down. I don't have to remark these at all. It's so much faster. Okay, get that nice done there. A little bit off there. That's good there. And this last one here, turning it over again, making sure I'm in line, and all the way down to the bottom there. These two are going all the way around. But the other two are not. Okay, and then I'm going to come down and do all of these from the top. Now, if I've done this well, oh, look at that, my lines line up. And same again with that one. So I must be doing something right here. Okay, making sure that they line up. Oops. And then this last one here, because I have to turn it around, I won't be able to see that easily. So I'm just going to make that little mark there where I know it matches against it, so that when I come along here, I've got that mark to line up with and can make my mark go around the side there. Okay. So that's our first lot of marking out. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and let you guys go on with getting this part here done. Okay, and then we'll show you what the next bit looks like after this. Okay, welcome back again. We're now going to mark out some more defining features on this to actually fill out where some waste might be. So for the first one here, these lines here, they're actually marking out where this indented trench is here for the front wheels to sit in. And on this back one here, we're marking out the depth of that trench. We're actually going to start with this back one here, okay, because we find this one a little bit easier. For this one, we don't need our tri-square anymore, but we do need to have our ruler again and our marking gauge. Okay, our marking gauge has our long pole in the middle, this kind of table-y section here, and a little spike, and this tightening knob on the side here. Okay. Now, if I have a look at my drawing here again, I don't know, there's nothing here that clearly aligns in terms of measurements to the bottom, so I'm going to use my ruler to put that on there, and I can see that as I come across here, this 10 millimeters one lines up best with the depth of the trench. So I'm going to use that as my measurement. So I'm going to set this marking gauge now to 10 millimeters. So I'm going to get it as close as I possibly can, resting my ruler on there, and then using where it meets my ruler with the spike to get that set. Now it'll move slightly because my finger's not perfect. So I'm just gonna very lightly tighten that and then check it again. And that's well off, okay? So I need to make that a bit deeper. Now because I've lightly tightened it, I can tap that against the table and it will move it down. If I've gone a bit too far, I was in the other direction, I can tap it the other way until I get that dead on where I want it to be. Tighten that properly, and then just check for a third time it didn't move when I tightened it. Okay, so you're gonna want to hold this in your dominant hand, and you're kind of choking it, you're kind of holding it right up tight around the top there. Okay, now this is our top face here, it's the top of the race car there, and we're gonna do our marking out so that this table part here is always against our top, because our material isn't actually 2 millimeters or 2 centimeters or 20 millimeters wide, it's 19. So if I mark them out from different sides, I'm going to end up with different heights on either side of my trench, which I don't really want. Okay, so I'm going to start this by moving between that line and that line there, and I'm going to put my point down. Oh, that shade doesn't work very well. Put my point down and then kind of turn that down so that I have no light coming through, which is why you couldn't see what I was doing then. Always making sure that the side face of my timber and that top face of the table are touching the whole way along. I'm then going to very lightly push that back until I get this kind of score mark, which you can see there on the video. It's not deep, it doesn't need to be, it just needs to be there, making that mark. Turn this around like that so I still have my top face touching that table. Do the same thing on that side there. Okay, and you can see that score mark lightly. Now to make it a little bit easier to see that, you then go over that with your pen. Okay, turn it around there. Do the same thing on that side there. All right, so now that I've got the sides of my trench marked out, okay, and the depth of it as well, I can actually mark that out as waste, because as you can see, it's all going to be removed. So to mark that out as waste, I very carefully create some lines that don't go over any of my other lines. Okay, now you wouldn't ever do anything to add extra texture and things to your project in any space that you weren't going to remove. Okay, because it'd be a pain in the bum to come back and have to sand it all away. So by doing this, you clearly can indicate that is waste, because you would never color it in like that if it was going to be a piece you'd want to keep. Okay, so that clearly marks that as waste that is going to be removed, and we can't accidentally cut part of it that we weren't meant to. Okay, to do the sides in here, okay, we're going to reset our marking gauge to 5 millimeters. Okay, you can see here on the drawing, it tells you to come in 5 millimeters there. Okay, so resetting that to 5. It's a bit dodgy, the 5 millimeter mark on my ruler, so you might not be able to see how well that's lining up. And that is, needing to go down just a smidge. And that's lining up much better there now. Okay, so I've got that reset to 5 millimeters. This one, you can see it's not on the same face, the trench. It's from the top and around to the side there. So I'm going to make sure that at all times, the side and that table are the same ones for each of them. So there, same way of holding it and moving it along as before. And then I'm going to turn it around and do the other side. Now, if you're finding that you're having a lot of trouble with your marking gauge coming away from your material, you probably have the point too high up, okay? And you're not using the side, you're using the tip, and the tip will try to sit into your timber and it will try to follow the grain, okay? So you just want to use the side and kind of rub the side of that point along your material, okay? So that you're kind of just creating a bit of a dent with the side. Again, we're going to go over this with our pen to make it a bit easier to see. Okay, and then we're going to mark out our waist. So we're cutting away those side parts. where the wheels are going to sit in later on. Okay, now I don't recommend always doing the next lot of marking out until you've done a bit of cutting, so you can come back and do the next lot of marking out a bit later on. So just keep an eye on where you're up to in the video, and then you can come back. I'm still going to show it now because this video will do all of the marking out, but you can go away and you can cut and chisel out your trenches and then come back and do the last bit of marking out. All right, so when you go on to doing your front section here and the very back little chamfer area at the back there. Okay, so let's have a look at where they line up with on our drawing here. Okay, and I've got my marking out sitting there like that, where it all lines up with where things are currently, so I know where I've got to be marking this out. So we have a look at this front one. It comes in 20 and goes down 10. So that we've already got our line here that it comes to. So we want to go down 10 millimeters there. Okay, we need to mark along the front and then back up there again. Now I can use my marking gauge to mark along the front there, and then use my ruler to line that up with the edge there, or I can use my ruler. So it just depends on which one is going to be the easiest at the time for you. This one means that you can't accidentally measure too much on one side and not enough on the other. Okay, so I'm just going to double check I'm back in the right spot. Again, from my top face, because you can see that measurement coming down from the top. Okay, and then I'm just going to run, so I'm on my top face, I'm just going to run that, but not in the right spot. That was close. Run that along the edge there. Okay, again, I'll go over that in my pen. Sorry, just making sure I was still on the video. It is a bit tricky on your end grain, so sometimes it can be a little bit harder to get going nicely. I'm going to make a little bit of a mark on there. Now I've got to be careful that when I do this next part, I measure from the edge of the timber and not from the end of any mark that I might have drawn. Okay. I'm going to go here. I'm just going to check that my pencil, pen even, is actually lining up with that mark, given that it's slightly wider. Now that I'm sitting here like this, I like to sometimes do my waist marking in as I go along, because my ruler prevents me from putting it on the other part here. Okay, so you can see it's a common mistake is people mark from the end of their marking point, where you're really just trying to mark where it was on the edge of the timber there. So I'm going to try to make sure that I go from that point to that point. Yep, that looks good. Okay, and then mark the rest of my waist there. The back end here, it's 8 by 8. Okay, so coming in 8, going down 8. This one is definitely worth setting your marking gauge for, because you've got the same measurement on both the top face and the end there with the end grain. That was pretty good. That's pretty spot on there. So again, I've got to mark it out along the top there. Mark it out along the back there. Go over that with my pen. Okay, and then I'm going to use my ruler to join those two up. Mark in the waist. Okay, I just wanted to check, because you can see 2 little dots there. I wanted to check which one was actually the right dot. Okay, always take your time with this kind of thing and make sure you're getting it right the first time. Okay, you make mistakes, everybody makes mistakes, but I've made lots, so I know which ones to try and avoid. And if I can teach you that in advance, then you don't have to make them yourself. Okay, so now we have got those marked out. Again, at this point, you can stop and you can go away and you can actually cut these away with the plane or your chisel. But I'm going to go on and continue showing you how to mark out where your wheels are going to go. Okay. Alrighty, so marking out your wheels. For this one, we're going to be marking out where the wheel's center is going to be. Okay, if you're actually drilling the hole that the axle is going to go on for both of those. Now they aren't incredibly prescriptive here as to exactly where those are. Now because this is drawn to full size and I know it's the same, I could actually just measure that in from the edge, okay, and try to mark it out that way, or I can mark it out from my other existing lines, etc., and try to figure those things out. But it's pretty much going to be halfway between here and here, and halfway between here and here, and about halfway down. Okay, it does show you a little bit further down than that, but I found that if we go halfway, it allows for any little mistakes that might happen without you drilling holes coming out the bottom of your timber or something like that. Okay, now at this point, if you've gone away and done some of your chiseling and things first, then you might have a bit of a trench cut in here. Now you can still mark that out, okay, you just have to hold things slightly differently when you do it, okay. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to mark the halfway point. Okay, again over here, come along with my ruler. Now, if I'm finding that that's tricky, I can actually just start from 100 on my ruler and go, okay, well, I can just go to 115, pretend that's 0, and go from there. Okay. All right, now when I come and I do this marking out with my tri-square, for a hole, it's really useful if you don't actually go all the way to the top and bottom of your material, if you can avoid it. I find that when I'm doing all of my marking out in advance like this, okay, it's a really good indicator that that's not a cut line, that's where you've marked out a hole. Okay, so it's a really clear, easy indicator because any line I'm going to cut on goes all the way to the edge. All right. Now again, you could set a marking gauge up for this, but because it's just for a little bit of a little mark that's going to go across here, I wouldn't stress too much about that. And you're just going to then go down, I'm going to go down 10 millimeters and just make a little mark going across that. Okay, and then again on this one here, a little mark going across that. Now if you do mark this out before you before you chisel out this trench, you want to drill this hole before you chisel the trench now, otherwise you'll lose your marking out. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Now I only need to mark this out on one side because on the drill press, the drill will just go all the way through my material. Okay, all the way through and out the other side. So I don't need to mark it out on the other side at all. Okay, so you can see there we've got our two clear marking points where we need to drill our hole. And the center of where those two lines meet is where the center of the drill bit will go. And that's all I need to do. So that is all the marking out for your race car. I hope you've been able to follow along with that nice and easily, and you've been able to learn how to use your tri-square and your marking gauge, and of course, your meta ruler really clearly. Alrighty, see you in class.